Welcome to Dewsbury, a Yorkshire town that was one of many to abandon Labour at the last election. Tonight, the candidates hoping to become their party's next leader will set out their case. I'm Sophy Ridge, this is Sky News, and this is the Labour debate. Well, here in the Victorian splendour of Dewsbury's Town Hall tonight, we're joined by voters from across the country who support Labour needs to end 10 years in opposition. Facing them, the three people who think they have what it takes to turn Labour's fortunes around: Sir Keir Starmer, Lisa Nandy and Rebecca Long-Bailey. Welcome to you all. Now, our audience will be leading the questioning tonight, but before we hear from them, each candidate has 90 seconds to make their case. Now, the order was drawn by lots. First up, it's Rebecca Long-Bailey.
Thanks, Sophie.
Over to you.
The election defeat in December was devastating. Across the so-called Red Wall, we lost seats to the Tories, like here in Dewsbury and next door in Wakefield, that for a century have almost always voted Labour. And it was devastating because we know what another Tory government will do to these communities, where here 1 in 3 children live in poverty. We need to listen to voters. They were angry, and we need to rebuild the trust that we lost. But no one voted against a better life. I know where we went wrong, and I know what it will take to rebuild trust in these communities. And as a working class woman who's always had to work twice as hard to prove that I'm just as good, I will fight to win these communities back again. I came into politics demanding nothing less than the best quality of life for my community and people in this country. And in the next general election, as Labour leader, I will make sure that our people's aspirations are truly realised.
Thank you very much, Rebecca Long-Bailey there. Next up to make their pitch, it's Lisa Nandy.
Thank you. This was no ordinary election. The entire base collapsed beneath our feet. When nurses and ex-miners are turning from us to the Tories in their hundreds of thousands, we need an honest reckoning with what has just happened. There is a small window when they're looking to us, but if we get this wrong again, there will be no party to vote for in 10 years' time. It isn't good enough to say we broadly got it right on Brexit, on leadership, on policy, without any understanding of how we had our worst election defeat since 1935, that we can just change the face at the top and hope to fix this. It's been 40 years in the making. In towns like Dewsbury, good jobs have been lost and with them young people and spending power. The scars are visible on our high streets, boarded up pubs and cancelled bus networks. People are growing old, hundreds of miles from grandchildren and children who move to the major cities where high housing costs, debt, inequality and air pollution are now the norm. You have told us and we have not responded. But I want you to know that I have heard you. I am determined to fix this and to bring Labour home to you. But progress is not inevitable. If you want a different country, you have to go out and fight for it. If you want a better leadership, you have to go out and vote for it. So I'm asking you to put your trust in me, because this may be our last chance. We can be back in power in 4 years' time, but this is the moment when we decide whether we have the courage to try.
OK. Thank you very much, Lisa Nandy. And finally, making their pitch to the audience, Keir Starmer.
Hello, thank you for coming. I look forward to your questions. We've had many hustings across the country and many questions, and quite right too. But there's one burning question that we have to answer, which is how do we get the Labour Party from where we are now back to a position where we can win a general election? Because that result in December was devastating. Devastating for brilliant MPs that we lost, for candidates who didn't make it, but devastating above all else for the millions of people after 10 years of Tory rule who desperately needed change and now who won't get it. And we've lost 4 elections in a row. It wasn't just that election in December, 4 in a row. Now, I came into politics to change lives. The Labour Party is there to change lives for the better, but you don't change lives for the better in opposition. So our party has a massive decision to take in this leadership election. Do we mope about, head in hands, taking lumps out of each other, divided, factional? We've been doing a lot of that. We're good at that, but we'll lose the next election if we do that. Or do we pull together, unite, rebuild, recognise that the next stage of the journey is for us? Labour governments don't come out of nothing. They come out of our movement and our party pulling together and saying the next bit of the journey is for us. And how proud would we be if our party took that decision now that we're going to get from where we are to where we need to be. And that's why I'm standing to be leader of our party.
OK, thank you all very much for your opening statements there. Well, we've heard from the politicians. It feels like it's time to talk to the people who really matter, the voters that these guys need to persuade. So let's get on our first question from the audience. Let's get cracking with that one. And the first question is from Phil Brickle from Manchester. I think I can see you up there at the top. What's your question for the candidates?
How are you going to hold the government to account so that they address the issue of coronavirus?
First question there from Phil Brickle, very topical. How are you going to hold the government to account so they can address the issue of coronavirus? And I'm going to go to Keir Starmer for this question first, please.
Phil, thank you for that. Can I just start by saying, as I speak for everybody here, that my heart goes out to all of those that have got caught up with this, wherever they are in the world, because it's deeply concerning, and it doesn't look as if it's receding, it looks as if it's expanding, and so this is a really serious issue. In terms of holding the government to account, I do have criticism of the government. I think they have been too slow, and I think they've given confusing advice, particularly over where to travel or not. But I would resist the temptation, actually, to go for them on that, because I think at the moment with this virus, what the public want to see is parties pulling together. So I would actually say, I would point out what I think they've done wrong, but I would actually offer, on behalf of the Labour Party, that we would work with the government and anybody else to reduce the impact of this, because I think for the public, what they do not want to see is people making party political points on an issue like this. So critical, of course, but actually, I would offer the government to work with them if it was possible to reduce the impact of this in our country or across the world, frankly. OK.
Lisa Nandy, I saw you nodding along to some of that. What's your view on this question?
Yeah, I mean, I really support what Keir just said about not trying to score party political points about this, because I have a lot of constituents who are very, very worried about the extent to which this may affect them and their families. So I think we've got to hold the government to account and be tough and robust where they're not doing enough. But
so
we've
where
also
aren't
got
they
to
doing enough then?
Sorry?
Where do you think they aren't doing enough then?
So, I mean, we were doing this today in the Chamber, so my colleague Jonathan Ashworth has been doing a very good job at pushing the government to do more. It's not good enough that we've got a Prime Minister who has basically gone missing. Half of the country is underwater because of the floods. The coronavirus is spreading. We should have a Prime Minister who is out there and on the front foot, making the case to our communities. Our NHS is really at breaking point. We've had a decade of cuts and hollowing out of our most precious public service. And that means that when crises hit, it's very, very difficult to make sure that we can step up and sort that out without the impact being felt elsewhere. So we've got to fund our NHS properly. We've got to pay the people who work in our NHS and treat them properly. And we've also got to take seriously public health. Public health has been one of the areas that has seen the worst cuts in recent years. And if we don't take that seriously, we will find that we don't have an empowered, protected population who know what to do and know how to keep themselves safe.
OK. Rebecca Long-Bailey, how are you going to hold the government to account on coronavirus?
Look, it is important not to make this a party political issue, but we have to accept the reality of the situation that we're in. Our NHS is facing one of the worst winter crises it's ever seen. Our NHS staff are rushed off their feet, working all the hours God sends, because they're good people who became part of the NHS because they wanted to help people, and sometimes we exploit their good nature, or certainly the government does. But after £20 billion worth of efficiency savings and cuts to public health, as we've heard, I do have concerns about our NHS being capable to deal with a big pandemic such as the coronavirus. So we need to highlight the deficiencies of the government's approach to the NHS. We need to drive forward increases in NHS investment to deal with pandemics such as this, as well as wider investment in public health overall.
OK, thank you. I'm interested to get a bit of a sense from you guys about how you're feeling about coronavirus. Put your hand up if you're worried about coronavirus. So quite a lot of people, it feels like a majority of people then saying they're not actually that worried about coronavirus. So perhaps reflecting, I guess, the fact that they haven't had any deaths so far in the United Kingdom. If you've got your hand up, keep your hand up again if you're worried. What did you guys make of some of the responses here then?
Yeah, it was a good answer. I mean, it's important not to get too party political on this. Hold the government to account, because obviously the first concern is the amount of lives lost, but it's going to have an impact on the economy. It could have a devastating impact on the economy. Recent reports, it could be as big an impact as the 2008 recession. So I think it's right that we, on the corona thing, we don't get too party political. But,
hold them to account at the same time.
Yeah.
Do you think that Boris Johnson should have convened Cobra over this?
Definitely, and I think it's wider than just what happens within the UK. We're already starting to see the impact through supply chains and the effect that that's having on businesses here in the UK. So it's a very serious economic issue as well as a health issue, and he should really have taken the lead on this.
I mean, I think this highlights the folly of the government's approach in recent years, which has been to smash up our relationships with our closest friends and allies across the European Union, because you cannot go it alone in a globally interdependent world. And this is a stark reminder of why that has been such a tragedy for us, and why we've got to hold the government to account not just on the coronavirus, but on the need for those international relationships that keep us safe.
And you were talking earlier a bit about some of the conflicting advice as well, weren't you? I mean, we've seen people in Tenerife, some people wearing masks, some not wearing masks. It feels like perhaps there's some confusion.
There has been conflicting advice, but the Prime Minister should convene Cobra and take a lead on this. He's gone hiding, he's gone missing just when he's needed. And it's not just on this, it's on the floods. It is quite extraordinary that this Prime Minister was out there when there was flooding, when there was a general election, and now he won't go anywhere near the communities. And we've all seen it across the country. I think most people expect our Prime Minister to take a lead when issues like this go wrong, and to be out there. I think actually convening Cobra is more important, the planning of what happens next, and he's not there, and he doesn't want to be held accountable, and I think it's shocking.
OK. Let's take another question now from the audience, shall we? William Gittins, I think you've got a question for our candidates, haven't you?
Thank you. Could you openly and honestly admit that Mr. Corbyn lost Labour the general election in December, and that you must move the party back to the centre if you have any opportunity to stop Boris Johnson from enjoying 10 years as Prime Minister?
Question there from William Gittins from Brighouse, not far from here in Dewsbury. A very relevant question in this constituency, but also, of course, others across the country as well. That question: could you openly and honestly admit that Mr Corbyn lost Labour the election, and you must move the party to the centre to stop Boris Johnson enjoying 10 years as Prime Minister? Lisa Nandy, what's your response?
Well, there's no question that Jeremy came up on the doorstep, and questions of leadership came up on the doorstep on nearly every door that we knocked on in the general election, and that wasn't just true in my constituency in Wigan, one of those red wall seats. It was true everywhere that I campaigned. But it wasn't just that. I mean, we'd had 4 years of nastiness towards ourselves and each other. For a party that claimed to want to build a more compassionate, fairer society, that was really existential. The issue of anti-Semitism came up on door after door after door, even in areas where there wasn't a big Jewish population, because people really didn't like it and they wanted to see us change. It wasn't just that either. Brexit came up over and over again. We'd managed to get ourselves into a position on Brexit where Leavers thought we were Remainers, where Remainers thought we were Leavers. And right across this country, wherever you were, people felt profoundly disrespected by it.
So who's to blame then for that Brexit? I mean, you've got the shadow Brexit secretary standing next to you. Is he to blame?
Well, it was a disaster. It was an absolute disaster. And I think there is a collective failure of leadership on Brexit that we have to own up to as a party. But let's be honest too, this has been a really long time coming. For decades, people in towns like mine and towns like Dewsbury have been saying that Labour is no longer of or for our communities. I want that to change. That's why I'm standing to be leader of the Labour Party. I don't want to move Labour to the centre. I think people see the need for fundamental radical change in this country, but I would like to move Labour to the north.
You said the Brexit policy was a disaster. Do you hold Keir Starmer responsible for that?
William, I went out with 44 teams across 44 constituencies in the general election, and all of the campaign teams were talking about what's coming up on the doors. Of course they were. It was a very lively conversation. And across the United Kingdom, and some of you may have knocked on doors, there was uniformity. There were 4 things that were coming up. The number one was the leadership of the Labour Party. And anybody who was in the campaign can't say otherwise. Whether that was fair or unfair is secondary. That was the number one issue, I'm afraid. Brexit came up. Of course it came up, and I completely accept it came up. But it came up differently in Dewsbury to the way it came up in Scotland, and that was one of the difficulties for our party.
Do you take responsibility?
I will come to that.
Okay.
I won't duck that in the slightest. The third thing that came up, and this is the teams that I was with reporting to me, and they were all open about it, was the manifesto was overloaded. It had good stuff in, but there was too much. It got to a tipping point where people didn't believe it, and therefore it didn't matter what was in it because it wasn't being believed. And I'm very sad to say the fourth thing that was coming up was anti-Semitism. And it came up as a values issue, and it came up as a competence issue. So far as Brexit is concerned, what we were trying to do was to protect ourselves from what Johnson was going to do. I didn't vote for Boris Johnson's deal because I thought that it was a very bad deal and it would end up in a really bad place. Now today, the white paper's been published, and it's obvious where Johnson's going to go next. It's got no deal, or nearly no deal, written all over it, and it's communities in Dewsbury and elsewhere that are going to pay the price. And that's why I didn't vote for Johnson's deal, because as soon as I saw what he'd put on the table, I thought it would end in the way that's been set out today.
The questions about Labour's Brexit policy, do you take responsibility for the policy as Shadow Brexit Secretary that Lisa Nandy has just described as a disaster?
I take responsibility for everything in our manifesto. It was actually a Shadow Cabinet decision. It was actually a decision of our whole party at party conference. But I'm not going to shirk from that. But I do. Since we're looking at what happens next, Leave Remain is over. So that divide is not there. We've left the EU, so whether you were for Remain or Leave is irrelevant. But there's a big test coming up for all of us.
OK, because we have spent a long time with you.
The question is, now Johnson is heading for no deal or nearly no deal. If we become leader of the Labour Party, will we take him on or we will give in to him? And that's the question we need to answer.
OK. Keir Starmer just said that the Shadow Cabinet was responsible for Labour's Brexit policy. As someone in the Shadow Cabinet, do you see yourselves as equally responsible?
Well, look, I think we need to recognise that there were many reasons as to why we lost this general election, and Brexit was one of the key ones. I come from a Leave constituency, and I could feel the anger on the doorstep from my constituents. They saw us in Parliament playing parliamentary games. They didn't understand why, and they thought we were trying to attempt to overturn the result of the referendum. And if you were a strong Remain supporter, well, you didn't think we were going far enough in having that close relationship with the European Union. But the sad fact is that with that lack of trust in Brexit, it took so many other things down with it. And yes, leadership did come up on the doorstep because we'd had 4 years of Jeremy being vilified and attacked by the press. We knew that we weren't trusted on issues such as anti-Semitism and our handling of that within the party. And on our manifesto, the sad thing is that despite it being the most transformative manifesto we've had in a generation, with the right answers to the right questions that society was facing, we didn't explain ourselves, and we didn't have a message that spoke to communities and spoke about their aspiration.
Although you've had the worst election results since 1935, and you say that the manifesto was great.
I tell you what, nobody voted against having a better quality of life, and we should have explained how the policies in that manifesto would have delivered that.
Okay.
But on the question about should we move to the centre, the Tories are laying a trap for us. They try to page themselves as the anti-establishment party in this general election. We were the party that didn't listen to our voters or our communities. And we can't fall into that trap. And the only way we avoid that trap is by having a bold, transformative vision of what the future will look like. And when we talk about left, centre, right, whatever you like, I'll let you into a little secret. Those policies, investing in education, investing in infrastructure, reindustrialising huge parts of the north, they weren't left-wing or radical.
Okay.
They were sensible economic policies that have been adopted by other countries in the European Union. And if it's good enough for them, it's good enough for us.
Okay. I'm keen to get a sense from you about where you feel Labour should be. Can we just have a quick show of hands on whether you think Labour should move back to the centre ground? Put your hands up if you think Labour should move back to the centre ground. at the next election. I know you had your hands up a little bit earlier, so is there something you wanted to say?
Yeah, so I'm from Stockton-on-Tees, and I knocked on a door in a general election, and one of the things in the general election, one of the things that was said to me was, you're offering me free broadband, but I can't afford to put food on the table for my kids, and I think that says it all, really. And in terms of anti-Semitism, I think this is more for Keir and Becky. How on earth did you stand by the leadership when, you know, so many Jewish people were made to feel that they couldn't vote for the Labour Party because they were so scared of the Labour Party, they were so scared of the Labour government? It was an absolute disgrace.
OK. Well, we are actually going to do anti-Semitism in a question later, but since you said that so passionately, it feels like quite a good time to actually address that directly. And I will put your questions straight to Rebecca Long-Bailey and Keir Starmer. How could you stay in the Shadow Cabinet? Keir Starmer.
I argued about this in the Shadow Cabinet. The Shadow Cabinet is somewhere where you can take the issue on. And we had robust discussion about it, and I was pushing time and again. I said we need the international definition of anti-Semitism. We need to change our rules so we can throw people out if they're clearly anti-Semitic. And we need to open the books to the Equality and Human Rights Commission. I didn't just do it in the Shadow Cabinet, by the way. I did it out in public on the media as well, making the case, because I genuinely thought that whether from the Shadow Cabinet or the backbenches or elsewhere, we had to take this on. Personally, I think it's a leadership issue, and if I were leader of the party, I would say it's my responsibility to deal with it. I would insist that whatever the state of the cases and the complaints, they're on my desk every Friday or whatever it is, so that I can see them, because having run a big organisation, I know that if you have a line of sight from the person who's leading, it makes a massive difference. And I would personally take responsibility for rebuilding our trust with the Jewish community. The test I would apply as leader of our party is whether everybody who has left the party because of anti-Semitism feels comfortable returning to it. So not a rule test, not a definition test, but a values test about our party, because if you're going to deal with this, it needs to be a leadership issue. It's a test of leadership, and I would lead on this differently.
OK, let's bring in our original questioner on anti-Semitism. Talib Shamsuddin, I know you wanted to ask a question on anti-Semitism, so if you just read out your question and then we'll find out what you make of the responses. Thank you.
The overwhelming majority of Labour Party members are not anti-Semitic. What will you do to dispel the misconception amongst voters that anti-Semitism is rife in the party?
Talib Shamsuddin there. Let's go to Lisa Nandy on that. Most Labour Party members are not anti-Semitic. What will you do to dispel the misconception amongst voters anti-Semitism is rife in the party?
Well, deal with it, I suppose, is the obvious answer to that. I mean, I felt very strongly about this because I represent a town where my working class Labour Party members have gone and fought racism and fought off the far right over and over again for decades. We saw Tommy Robinson off last year in the European elections, and if he tries to come back to Wigan, we'll see him off again. And they were knocking on doors in this election being told that they were racist because we'd had a collective failure of leadership at the top of the party for years, where we'd allowed high-profile cases of anti-Semitism to go undealt with and unaddressed, and by doing so, we'd given a green light to anti-Semites everywhere that they had a home in Labour. Now, look, I spoke up about this. I spoke up about it when I was in the Shadow Cabinet. It's the only time I broke collective responsibility, and I spoke up on every occasion in the 3 years after that. And the reason that I did that is because I am half Indian, and I know what racism feels like, and I know that it cannot be your battle alone to fight it. There is no such thing as being not racist. There is either being a racist or there is being an anti-racist. It requires you to take an active stance and to go out and challenge and fight for better. That is what I did. There is a serious question of judgment here. And I would just say this to Keir, is that I believe that you are sincere about this, but if we do not acknowledge how badly the Shadow Cabinet as a whole got this wrong, we will not earn the trust of the Jewish community, and those people that you talk about, who I want to see back in the party, will never look to us again.
Lisa, you were in a Shadow Cabinet when this issue came up as well.
And I spoke out.
Not for the last 3 years.
I spoke out publicly, and then I left and I didn't return. And I continued to speak out for 3 years. And, you know, the Shadow Cabinet was offered sight of the submission to the Equality and Human Rights Commission, which was investigating Labour for institutional racism. And apparently not a single person took up the offer of
that's
seeing
nonsense.
the party's position on that.
That's absolute nonsense. Tom
I'm
Watson,
sorry, we've got to be honest about where we've got to.
Hear me out about what actually happened. I don't break... Shadow Cabinet should be confidential, and I don't break the confidences. It was Tom Watson and I that were asking for that submission and were offered it. So this is complete nonsense. That was what we were trying to do. I argued we should change the definition to the international definition. I argued it for months in the Shadow Cabinet, and in the end we did it. I argued that we should have automatic expulsion of clear cases, and in the end, after those arguments, we did it. So we made some difference.
You're talking there about not wanting to break Shadow Cabinet responsibility. Do you remember Rebecca Long-Bailey speaking out in Shadow Cabinet?
I think, given where we've got to, I think the last thing our members, our movement and our country wants is us all trying to take lumps out of each other about who did what. The test for us is how would we deal with this as leader of the Labour Party, and I would take a leadership role on this in the way I've described.
People want to know what happened when it comes to anti-Semitism. That is fair, isn't it? People want to know the truth.
There were massive rows in the Shadow Cabinet. We were absolutely on it, and we were making massive arguments. I was saying over and again, once that Equality and Human Rights Commission is looking at us, don't close the books, give them access to all of our records.
Did Rebecca Long-Bailey speak out at Shadow Cabinet?
Look, Rebecca didn't speak out in the same way as I did in my view, but I really, really don't think, and I don't think it's fair, and it's right for us to just try to score points now off each other in relation to this.
I want to bring you in. I want to bring in Rebecca Long-Bailey at this point.
In 4 weeks' time, the test for us is how are we going to deal with it as leader of the Labour Party?
I'm keen to talk now to Rebecca Long-Bailey. It's only fair to bring in Rebecca Long-Bailey at that point. What is your recollections of what happened in those Shadow Cabinet?
Look, I'm not pointing fingers or making a note of the exact dates and times that particular individuals spoke at Shadow Cabinet. Keir knows that I spoke at Shadow Cabinet a number of times about this. I was often the Shadow Cabinet member that did the media to try and explain what was happening and expressed my concern many, many times about how we weren't tackling this in the way that I thought we should. But the time
doesn't seem to be what he's saying.
The time for retrospective criticism of each other has gone. We are in a crisis. And I know that it's been soul-destroying for many of our members because we're not an anti-Semitic or a racist party. But many of our members went out in that general election and they knocked on the doors of Jewish voters who didn't trust us and they were frightened of the Labour Party. And we have to accept that that has happened and we've got to rebuild that trust. And that's why we need to have an independent process for complaints, not just for anti-Semitism, for all forms of discrimination within the party. We've got to adopt any recommendations that the EHRC put forward in the coming months. And we need to have an auto-expulsion process for clear-cut cases of anti-Semitism and racism within our party.
OK, thank you very much. I'm keen to come back to you, but just first, put up your hand if you think the Shadow Cabinet did enough on anti-Semitism. OK, that's pretty damning. You do?
No,
just before...
It's not about anti-Semitism per se. This is about propaganda against a leader who's fought anti-Semitism in his constituencies. He's fought racism, and he's driven out right-wing people. Now, that is about who really does make the benefit from this accusation that the Labour Party is anti-Semitic. I've been a socialist and a member of the Labour Party for 40-odd years. Never once in a CLP or any left-wing movement and meeting have I heard an anti-Semitic comment. And that's why it's propaganda, and who gets it? The Tories benefit.
Propaganda, Lisa Nandy, do you agree with that?
Look, I understand why you're frustrated, because most of our members fight racism and they joined the Labour Party like me because they hate racism as much as they hate poverty, and they go out and fight it day in, day out on the front line, especially where it's hard. But that is why the failure to deal with those high-profile cases of anti-Semitism over and over again over 4 years, we had Jewish Labour MPs, female MPs, subject not just to racism but misogyny as well, begging the party to take it seriously, and being told that it wasn't an issue was so wrong. And you said they were right-wing. I don't care if they're right-wing or not right-wing. Racism is racism.
OK, thank you, sir. I'm keen.
That's what it's
Thank
about.
you
And it's the right
for
wing of
your
the party. The
contribution.
Rabbi, the chief rabbi, a
Thank you for your
Tory
question.
voter.
I'm keen. We need to listen to
to.
other people in the audience now. Thank you for your contribution. And I'm keen to go back to our original questioner, Talib Shamsuddin. What do you make of the responses that you've heard
Well,
today?
they've just been taking chunks out of each other. And what really disappoints me is that as leaders, what you should be doing is celebrating, as well as challenging anti-Semitism wherever it happens. You've not celebrated enough and defended the 99.9% of the Labour membership, which are neither racist nor anti-Semitic. And that's a failure on all your parts. So you know what? I'm thinking of voting for none of you because of that.
Can I just address that?
Very briefly, because I'm keen to move on to other issues as well.
I accept that most of our members aren't anti-Semitic.
When was the last time you celebrated it? When was the last time you mentioned it?
Just hear me out. But one is too many, and then we had some in our party who were trying to deny we had a problem. And that is part of the problem. I actually think, for the vast majority of our members, they're desperate for leadership on this because they do think it reflects on them and it reflects on their collective reputation. They want a leader who's going to sort this out and take us forward so that we can celebrate what we really are, which is an anti-racist party, a party that the Jewish community came to and supported for many, many years. We overcomplicated it. If you're anti-Semitic, you should be out of the Labour Party. And if we'd done that quickly, effectively, we wouldn't be in the mess that we're in.
Thank you very much. I know that passions are really running high on this subject. We've got lots of splits in the audience, but let's move on to some of the other issues that I know you want to put to candidates as well. We've got a question now from Sophy Kelly from York. What's your question?
How would you assure the electorate that the Labour Party can be trusted to manage the economy?
Question there from Sophy Kelly. How would you assure the electorate that the Labour Party can be trusted to manage the economy? Rebecca Lumbailey, I'd like to go to you first.
Well, the whole point of the Labour Party is to deliver a good quality of life to every single person in the United Kingdom, and they have to have a workmanlike plan to deliver that, all the way through from a detailed industrial strategy to create businesses and industries and prosperity within the economy, all the way through to a fair taxation system that properly funds our public services. And to gain that credibility, we explain our policies, and that's not what we did very well in the general election, unfortunately. The comment about broadband that the gentleman in the audience made before, there was an economic case for the broadband policy. It would have improved productivity, it would have supported business, but because it was plopped in at the end of a general election campaign, we didn't explain ourselves, and that damaged our credibility.
So what would you have dropped then from the manifesto?
I wouldn't drop anything from the manifesto. I think they were all the right policies, but what I would say is that there were elements within the manifesto that were deliverable within 5 years, green industrial revolution, investing in education, for example, and there were other elements within the manifesto that were part of a longer-term programme. So the 4-day week's a key example of that. That was an aspiration. We'd never have got there until we improved productivity and we'd rolled out trade unions in every single workplace to push up terms and conditions for employees, and that would have been a long-term goal. So it would have been important to have the manifesto that was deliverable within 5 years, but also have your longer-term programme aside that.
So you had the worst election defeat since 1935 and you wouldn't drop anything from the manifesto?
No, I think they were the right answers to the right questions. So the Green Industrial Revolution is a key policy. It was a huge policy. But the electorate
didn't agree.
Well, I think they did. It was a very popular policy when you look at polling, as was bringing water and energy into public ownership to bring bills down, as well as investing in the economy, because those policies would have created jobs, prosperity, as well as tackling climate change.
OK, thank you very much. Lisa Nandy, how can you assure the electorate that the Labour Party can be trusted to manage the economy? That was the question there.
Well, let me support Becky on some of the policies in the manifesto, because I didn't get any sense that they were unpopular. I just think by the time we got to the point that the election had been called, people had stopped listening. I don't think many people in this country knew what was in our manifesto, because I think they'd already decided that they weren't going to vote for us. But in terms of restoring trust on the economy, I think there's a few things that we need to do. The first is to rediscover the language of priorities. As one woman said to me, it's our money, love, and we haven't got a lot of it. So we've got to be clear about what we would prioritise and what we can realistically achieve.
So what would you drop then?
Well, I think we need to start with issues like social care that are breaking families across this country, and we've got to show that we've got a real plan. And if you have a real plan, you have to show that you're going to pay for it. So we all stood on a manifesto that said that you put 5% on the top rate of income tax. That seems to me to be broadly right and fair. But most people who earn huge amounts of money put their income into wealth and assets. So we've got to be honest that we want to raise wealth taxes to bring them in line with income taxes so that we can pay for a decent social care settlement.
What kind of wealth taxes are we talking about? We're talking about taxing people's homes?
So mansion tax, land value tax, these are all things that we've explored in the Labour Party over the last few years but never quite committed to.
And would you bring that in as leader then?
I think we've got to be honest with people. People want a better social care settlement. We will deliver it, but in order to deliver it, we'll be honest with you about how we'll pay for it.
Okay.
And that's how you earn back people's trust. And in many parts of this country, we are in power. In Wales and in many towns and cities across the UK, where we run the councils or we have mayors. And in those places, we're going to have to go out and demonstrate over the next 4 years that we can be trusted in order to deliver the radical change that people need, and do so in a way that is honest and that we can pay for. I believe we can do it, and that's how we're going to win back power in 4 years' time.
Keir Starmer.
We're one of the wealthiest countries in the world, but the economy's just not working for everybody. I walked here from the station an hour or so ago, and you may have done the same, and walked past the soup kitchen here in Dewsbury. And I stopped and talked to them, and they run that every week, and it's freezing cold. And there's between 60 and 120 people in this town using that soup kitchen, and there were people with their children queuing up on a cold night like tonight. Our economy isn't working. The statistic for poverty in children is terrible. An average of 9 out of every class of 30 children is living in poverty. Our economy isn't working. And for mental health assessments, it takes about 18 months to have an assessment, even if you're an 8-year-old having an autistic assessment. So the economy is clearly not working. So the idea that people don't want change, I think, is wrong.
But it's trust on the economy, isn't it? How can they be trusted?
I'll come exactly to that point, because in that election, I met many people who said that this isn't right. It's got to change. But they didn't trust us to do it. They didn't trust the Labour Party to be the party to bring about that change, to be that force for good. And it's that trust that we have to regain between now and when the next general election is. But I think it would be wrong, in my view, to take away from the last general election that people were happy with things as they are. They're not. They don't like the fact that our NHS is so grossly underfunded. They don't like the fact that social care is in complete crisis. Lots of people who need care are not getting it. And people want that to change. They desperately want that to change. They didn't trust our party on this. So trust is key in this going forward.
OK, thank you very much for that. Well, let's move on to another question, shall we? We've got a question from Jenny Gale, I think, in the audience.
Yes.
Jenny, what's your question?
Why are you all so keen to, or seem to be so keen to, distance yourself from Tony Blair and New Labour when he was massively successful in winning 3 elections? And we've not won any since.
Question there from Jenny Gale. Why are all the current leadership contenders so keen to distance themselves from Tony Blair and New Labour when he succeeded and won 3 elections? Lisa Nandy.
Well, I haven't distanced myself from Tony Blair or Jeremy Corbyn. What I've tried to do is have an honest assessment of what we got right and wrong in government and what we got right and wrong in the last few years, because I think it's only by being honest about what we got wrong that we earn permission with the public to talk about what we got right. And there were many things we got right in government, particularly the minimum wage, which was an absolute game changer in towns like mine and put money back into the pockets of working people that went straight back out into the economy. Health, education, Sure Start, the Education Maintenance Allowance, the world's first Climate Change Act. These were things that you can do in government if you win power, and it really, really matters. But I came into Parliament after 10 years of working with homeless teenagers for the charity Centrepoint, and then later with child refugees, taking the last Labour government to court over its treatment of refugee children and trying to close down the family wing of Yarlswood. There were things we got wrong in government. And when Jeremy Corbyn was elected in 2015, I felt a moment of profound relief that suddenly we were saying no more immigration slogans on mugs, no more lack of compassion to some of the poorest children and families in the country. We are going to be honest about our values and we're going to wear them on our sleeve again. Now, I think we've got to take the best of the last 4 years and show that we'll stand up for people in the benefits system, show that we'll stand up for people with disabilities, show we'll stand up for refugees, but be honest about how we're going to create that fairer, more decent society and build the broad, strong, unified team that will take us back into government. That's the lesson of 3 times when we've won power, is that broad, strong, decent, unified teams win elections and give us reach out into the country. I know we can be that again, but to do that, we've got to have an honest assessment about where we've been.
Karin Bailey. Tony Blair, the only living Labour leader to have won a majority. Was he a good leader?
I think we should learn from history and we should take the positives from it. In 45, we won that election by promising to rebuild Britain after the war. Under Harold Wilson, we promised the white heat of technology through an industrial revolution that would transform industry in our homes. And in 1997, we won under Tony Blair, promising education and aspiration. But we shouldn't look backwards, because we're in a time now that faces different challenges and we need to have the answer to those challenges.
Was he a good leader, in your view?
Any Labour leader who won a general election was a good leader, and we take the positive elements from what they achieved, and of course we don't repeat the same mistakes that they made. But it shouldn't be a question within our party about which leader you identify with, which camp you're in. We're a broad church, and if we learn anything from the last 4 years, it's that we've not been a united party, and disunited parties don't win general elections. So we celebrate our differences. It's great that we've got groups within the party pushing different policy platforms, but we have those arguments in private, and then we unify behind the elected leader of the party, come what may.
OK. Keir Starmer?
The last Labour government did really good things that changed the lives of millions of people, particularly children in poverty, particularly Sure Start. I thought what we did on Sure Start 0 to 5 was critically important, because if you change lives at that critical period, you deal with equality or inequality in a really profound way. And never forget the Good Friday.
Have to be quite brief, because you have had more time than other people, but I'm keen to let you
and never forget the Good Friday Agreement. I disagreed with Tony Blair and the last Labour government over the Iraq War. I'm afraid. I thought it was wrong, I thought it was an unlawful war, and I thought we shouldn't have gone into it. But that doesn't mean there weren't other good things done. I would agree with Lisa that we don't trash the last 4 or 5 years either, because what Jeremy Corbyn brought to our party was much greater clarity that we were against cuts to public services and against austerity, and I think that's very important.
I'm keen to get a bit of clarity from the audience. Put your hands up if you think Tony Blair was a good Labour leader. Oh, and put your hands up if you think he was not a good leader. So it's a bit divided, but perhaps more people on the side of Tony Blair. 120 years of the Labour Party now, and yet Labour's never had a woman leader. Rebecca Long-Bailey, does that matter?
Of course it matters, because I don't want Boris Johnson crowing on the other side of the dispatch box if we don't get a female leader this time, because we've got to change culture within society. We know what women face. We know that 86% of the cuts that have been brought through austerity have fallen on the shoulders of women, and I think it's about time that we have a strong northern woman from Salford as our next Labour leader.
Keir Starmer, does it matter? Yes or no?
This has come up, as you can imagine, a number of times in these hustings and these questions. I don't think, and there's 3 of us now before our party, that any of us are standing because we're a man or because we're a woman. I think everybody is genuinely putting the case they think is right for our party, for our movement and for our country, and doing it in a constructive spirit. People have been struck by how we're doing this, and our members will decide. I'm very conscious that this isn't the job of one person anyway, that it will have to be a team effort, and that's why I've been saying to those that will support me, I don't want you supporting me, as it were, behind me. I want you alongside as part of my team, because this is going to have to be a team effort going forward.
So the question, does it matter that Labour hasn't had a woman leader? Well,
of course it matters, but you know, we are all making the case about where we go next. And you know, people also say, well, it's important to have someone from the north, the northeast, the northwest, etc. Actually, the leader of the opposition has to speak for the whole of England, the whole of Scotland, the whole of Wales and for Northern Ireland. And I think that's what really, really matters as we bring the country together.
OK. Lisa, Nandy, does it matter that Labour hasn't had a woman
Yeah, I was
leader?
completely with Becky until she said Salford. I mean, I've been really inspired by the number of young women who've come forward since I started this campaign, especially young mixed-race women who've said we feel like this is our campaign and this is our party. And what's started to happen over the last few weeks is that a lot of older women, that they've often brought their mums to events, who said, we feel like this can finally happen and we can vote for a woman knowing that that woman could become Prime Minister. And I would just say this, is that right across the world, if you look at the political leaders that are going out and emotionally reconnecting and making waves from Finland to New Zealand, they are young women leaders. So I think it is time in the Labour Party that we did that. I think Boris Johnson wouldn't have a clue what to do with a Bolshe woman leader. And I think I'm asking you to go out and vote for it.
Time now to take another question from our audience. I think we've got one from Steve Cudmore. What's your question?
Thank you. If I was to put you as my first choice on the ballot, who should I put on as my second choice, and why would they be the best alternative to you as our leader?
Who should I put as my second choice? Steve Cudmore question there. Great question, I have to say. Rebecca Long-Bailey, who would you put as your second preference?
Well,
presuming you put yourself
I'm
first,
all
obviously.
for unity, but just put one choice, and that's RLB all the way, because this is the biggest decision that any of our Labour members are going to have to take. We've been through the pain of defeat, we've grieved all the stages of grief, but we've got to recognise that this could potentially be a turning point. We either scale back our ambition and move away from what we fundamentally believe in as Labour Party members, and that is delivering the best quality of life to our communities.
So you're not going to put a second preference then? You're just going to put one preference for your vote?
No, if you want transformative visions, big ideas and the ability to win the next general election, it's Rebecca Long-Bailey number one.
Who's your second preference going to be, Lisa Nandy?
Well, I haven't got one, and for a very simple reason, which is that I like both of the people standing next to me, and I think they've both got real strengths to offer, and I've said that I would be proud to serve alongside them. Whoever comes out of this contest is going to come out strengthened by the process, not weakened by it. But I would just say this as well, if we don't get this right this time, and if we don't have an honest reckoning about how serious this is and how long a time this has been coming, there will not be another Labour leadership contest. There will not be a party to vote for in 10 years' time, and that's why I'm asking you to put your trust in me. 500,000
Labour members are going to have to choose their second preference, and you guys are all chickening out. So disappointing. Keir Starmer, are you going to give us your second preference?
Steve, there are some times in these hustings when we've all stood together. I've been trying not to be divisive and not to take lumps out of the other candidates on any issue. Because I don't think that's the way forward, and I'm glad that we haven't. So I'm not going to get into who would be my second preference.
Steve, are you a bit disappointed
What I would
there?
say, Steve, is that I want to pay tribute to the other two candidates because they put forward really powerful cases for the leadership of the Labour Party, and the leadership of the Labour Party, whoever actually wins this, is before you now as a collective, and I think that's very important. And a lot of people have taken great hope from that.
OK. Are you disappointed with the answers?
I'm disappointed. I'm not trying to sow disunity or disharmony within the three. But to Lisa's point, you know, what we face here is a real challenge as a party, and I think there are distinct differences, and I think, Keir, you're playing both sides, and I wanted to identify where you sat in this, and I think you're trying to be everything to everyone, and I really want to get a sense of where you were aligned to. And I think, in fairness, Becky, what I thought I would hear from you, and I didn't hear from you, is, and Lisa, is that there is, you know, for Leave voters, our Brexit policy was toxic, and it was seen as a betrayal. And I am really concerned that how are we going to win back seats like Dewsbury and persuade people that voted Leave that we've listened to them if the first thing we do is put our shadow Brexit secretary in the position of leading our party. And Keir, you did a great job in that, but I just think it sends the wrong message, and I'm really worried about that. So I'm surprised that people don't have an opinion on it.
I just want to give you the chance to respond to the fact that this gentleman is saying that you're playing both sides. He's not sure where you stand. I'm trying to bring our party together. I think one of the mistakes we've had over the last few years is we've been asking ourselves, which bit of the party are you from, not what are you saying?
I deliberately want to bring our party together. Yes, I want people to come together in a united way, because there's an old saying in politics, which is if you're a divided party, you don't win elections. So I am trying to bring different parts of the party together. In my campaign, I'm proud of the fact that I've got people from different parts of the party who've all come together positively to be part of my campaign. I want to model what a powerful Labour Party could be if we unite. And I think we will be so much stronger. If we just say, well, you've got to be from this part of the party or that part of the party, that's a recipe, I'm afraid, for losing the next general election.
Thank you very much. Now, we've heard lots from the audience so far, but in some ways, the people who know the candidates better than anyone is the three of you on stage. So after our final question, I'm going to give you the opportunity to put a question to each other. So one question to one of your other candidates, OK? So just a few moments to have a little think about what it is you'd like to ask your rivals. In the meantime, we can talk to Caroline Adden from Perthshire, who has a question for our candidates.
Yeah, I'm 100% blind and I can't see you. What can you do personality and help me vote for you?
So the question there from Caroline Adden, I'm 100% blind, I can't see you. What one thing can the candidates tell me about your personalities to help Caroline understand you better? Rebecca Long-Bailey.
God, I'd be here all day if I told you everything about my personality, but I'd like to think I was down to earth. Obviously, I'm northern, you can tell that from my accent, so I don't take any messing about from anybody. And I'm very grounded. I think my family and my little boy, who I call the king, tell me how it is, and that kind of drives everything that I do, really.
Why is he called the king?
Because we serve him. We are his servants in our house.
Any examples?
Well, every day when he gets in from school, he has a little routine where he has a little kind of orange lolly thing. So he comes in and he goes, "Mummy, orange lolly," and then he gets the orange lolly, and then he'll come in 5 minutes later and demand a hot chocolate, and then he gets a hot chocolate, and then he'll come out 5 minutes later and want a snack, and I'm just there running around, seeing to his every whim.
OK, can definitely understand the description now. I think parents of toddlers everywhere perhaps can recognise a few of those things there. Lisa Nandy, what thing can you tell us about your personality to help Caroline Adden understand you a little bit better?
I mean, I suppose ever since I was a child, I've always gone to where things are hardest and taken arguments on at their hardest point and tried to help people who are in most need, even and especially where it's difficult and it's unpopular. If you were running to be leader of the Labour Party, you probably wouldn't have done any of the things I've done over the last 20 years. I went to fight for child refugees under the last Labour government and ended up pitted against the last Labour government over and over again because I couldn't bear the way that those children were treated in what's supposed to be a civilised country. I came into Parliament as a new MP, fighting against free schools and academies at a time when Labour was supporting them because I could see what they were doing to children with special educational needs.
What about your personality, though? What is like a personality question?
I suppose just a bit subversive, really, because in the last few years I stood up for a Brexit compromise because I campaigned for Remain, but I could see how disrespected people felt in towns like mine. I could see what it was doing to the bond of trust with the electorate, and I could see that we were going to end up here if we didn't take that seriously. So I suppose what you've got to know about me is that I will always go to where the difficult thing is, and I will take that on and I'll fight for it. And Labour needs that right now. We need that courage. We need that ambition. We need to go out and fight tooth and claw to bring Labour home to the people we once represented.
Keir Starmer.
Caroline, I'd really love you to come and spend the day with me so you could see me in what I do day in, day out. I'm the sort of person that when I see something that's wrong or an injustice, I can't walk by it. That's an easy thing to say, so let me give you an example. We've had terrible knife crime issues in my constituency in Holborn and St Pancras, which is Camden, with particularly young boys, teenage boys, being stabbed to death. And when I was in the middle of some of the really heated debates on Brexit in Parliament, when things were really, really heavy, I got a call from the leader of Camden Council to say that tragically we'd had another one of these cases, a Somali family, and she said to me, "I'm about to go and see the mum." And I said, "Will you wait? I'm getting on the tube now. I will come with you." We did it with no cameras, no press, anything like that. And I just went and stood with her and held the mum who'd just lost her child because I thought it was the absolutely right thing to do. And I hope that's just a measure of how I would do politics. We often say what we do in Parliament, the big things and the slogans and all the rest of it. Sometimes it's what you do in those moments, as it were, a personal decision, that I think, and I hope, gives you a sense of the sort of person I am.
I just need to jump in because we are sadly running out of time, and I'd love to get you, give you the chance to ask these questions. Rebecca Long-Bailey, what's your question for someone else? We've got to be quick here.
To Keir, would you keep the top rate of tax that we had set out in our manifesto with a 50p tax rate? Because you've been quite ambiguous about your answer to that one.
Yes.
Good.
OK.
Like Paxman.
That was quick. Lisa Nandy.
I feel a bit ashamed about this question after hearing that Paxman-esque impression. I was going to say to the other two candidates, can we go for a drink after this contest?
Yes.
If so, Wigan or Camden, and what are you drinking?
Go on then.
There's a right answer to this, Keir.
Wigan.
Wigan!
Keir, and what are you drinking, Keir Starmer?
Oh, I'll have a pint of bitter.
OK. Drink?
Gin.
Keir Starmer, now, what's your question to another candidate?
My question is this. If I succeed in this, will you work with me to unite our party so that we can fight as a collective force going forward to the next general election together?
Yes, absolutely. And more than that, I'll tell you the truth, like Becky says, behind closed doors, and I know she will too, and together we'll get it right.
OK. Thank you. Thank you very much. That's almost it from Dewsbury here. Before we go, very quick straw poll from our audience. Who thought Keir Starmer won the debate? Hands up. Lisa Nandy? Rebecca Long-Bailey? Very unrepresentative straw poll, of course. But there you go. Thank you very much for being such a lively audience as well. I can see that you want to say something, so.
This is about unity. Now, I got a little bit of paper here. I pop it up.
We haven't got too long left, sir, but not to hurry you.
The outcome of the last general election suggests that Labour is dangerously disconnected, both from the ordinary to extraordinary. In other words, Labour has lost its position as true party of the people.
Okay.
My question is this: how do we rebuild Labour to restore trust in politics, stop the decline in Labour support, and take the fight back to the newly elected Boris Johnson government and win
Thank you very much. Sadly, we haven't got time to get the answers, but I hope that you've found some answers to your questions on the show so far. Thank you to the candidates. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for the audience as well. And thank you so much for watching the Sky Labour debate. It's been great to be here in Dewsbury. Thank you.
Hello there, this is a Sky News special programme on the Labour debate that's just taken place in Dewsbury as the three candidates to replace Jeremy Corbyn tackle the party's landslide, election defeat, Brexit and anti-Semitism, amongst other issues. Coming up, we'll be asking the audience which candidate they thought performed best. And we'll be assessing what it means for the front-runner, certainly before this debate, Sir Keir Starmer, after a Sky News poll suggested he's on course at the moment for a convincing win. Well, you're very welcome to this special programme on the Sky News Labour debate. The three candidates to succeed Jeremy Corbyn, having been answering questions from that audience in Dewsbury, a seat, of course, that fell to the Conservatives, like so many, at the general election. Sir Keir Starmer, Rebecca Long-Bailey and Lisa Nandy want the job of resurrecting Labour as an electoral force nearly a decade after it lost power. Unsurprisingly, then, all of them criticised the Prime Minister. They also, though, had harsh words for each other on the future direction of the party, Brexit and anti-Semitism, which animated some people in the audience.
Personally,